Alrighty.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 82 Alliance, A Better Tomorrow webinar series. My name is Rob Henry. I'm the current president of the 82 Alliance, and thank you all for joining us and welcome. We're going to, Maria, if you can just advance to the next slide. A little bit about the 82 Alliance. So we're a nonprofit 501c3 mobility think tank focusing on reimagining how people move throughout our communities. And if we all could work together, we think we can create a better future for all. We bring together both private and public sectors to create change and improve our transportation systems. And a lot of this work was created post-pandemic as we thought about what our collective future could look like and the vision of the future that we would like to see versus going back to what was. So Maureen, you go to the next slide. So through that, we've been over the past 3 or 4 years working to help build the Alliance, putting on different webinars, putting on some events, and also sending out different reports that we've worked on. We've also done a partnership and presented with the Smithsonian on climate change and the impact that mobility has on that space. So now, and last year we did our Workplace Journey Survey, which was the first national survey primarily in the United States to determine how people were getting to and from work, what it was looking like, what were employers looking to mandate or not mandate, what was being offered, and then provided that information out to the public. So now we're looking to grow the 82 Alliance. We're putting our board in place right now. We are looking to add to our membership. And this is something that we just really started. So our first initial goal is to get to 82 members. So if you're interested in joining us at a champion level or advocate or a supporter level, you can find all that information on our website. And if you would like to have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of our team here at the 82 Alliance. You can flip Maureen. Some of the programs that we're working on, like this webinar in 2024, is our Better Tomorrow Awards. So this is an awards program that we'll be unveiling later this year that will target private, public, government, university, employers, nonprofits, advocates, all stemming and working towards a better tomorrow through mobility. And so if you think of kind of like LEAD awards and kind of the standard, what we're going to use is our workplace journey data that we're going to use from last year, and then actually do that survey again this year and use that as a benchmark to help develop the framework for those awards, which will be given out at the end in the fall of 2024. And that will be in conjunction with an educational program that we're working on that will be in person. And in addition, we'll have a couple more webinars that we're working on for this year. And of course, networking, training, and then additional research, which we're looking to do in 2024 and beyond. Flip the slide, Maureen. So today I'm very excited to have 4 dynamic speakers talking about what it takes to be a better tomorrow and kind of set the standard of what it looks like when you're focusing on mobility improvements and thinking about climate and making a better tomorrow. So I'm pleased to have Ron Becker, the Senior Vice President of Operations Sustainability at Brandywine Realty Trust. We're joined by Brendon Harrington, the Senior Director of Global Transportation at Google. We have Aaron Fodge, Director of Active Transportation and Fleet Services at Colorado State University, and Andy Keeton, Vice President of Global Strategy at Commutifi, also a former podcast partner of mine. We did some podcasts as well over the past couple of years. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ron.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Rob. And welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. So to dive right in, next slide, if you could. And the next one. And there we go. All right. So to dive right in, for those of you who do not know us, I am the Senior Vice President of Operations and Sustainability with Brandywine Realty Trust. We are a real estate investment trust based in Philadelphia. We have roughly, as noted here, about 164 properties, 1,538 plus tenants, about 28 million square feet. And we're located predominantly down the eastern seaboard, New Jersey, Philadelphia, suburban PA, Metro DC, including Northern Virginia, Rockville, Delaware, Richmond, Virginia, and then hang a right and go out to Austin. But let's dive in to focus on what we're really here to talk about. The nice thing about Brandywine is that our focus and mission are really driven by the thought that the value in what we do lies in the difference we can make. And this ethos really informs how we make decisions, interact with our stakeholders, and create impact through multiple avenues of socioeconomic change. We prioritize healthy buildings and the health and wellness of our employees, tenants, and visitors to our buildings. And all of this is supported by a program driving constant reduction of utility consumption and really a thoughtful approach to green investments in our buildings. These approaches and priorities have been woven into the fabric of Brandywine's being and has really been our mission since well before it was a corporate requirement or just kind of chic to be doing it. Next slide, if you could. Thank you. So just a couple of little tidbits on some of the achievements that we've achieved or made, there. For the GRESB, for the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, we have been reporting for ever and a day. We are a 9-time Green Star Award and have achieved 5-star 2 times in the last 2 years. We're part of the inaugural group of companies that were named to the Green Lease Leader Platinum level. Green Lease Leaders is an IMT, Institute for Market Transformation, and Department of Energy endeavor. And basically, we use our leases to engage our tenants so that we can drive change, we can drive partnership with them, and we can work toward that goal of consumption reduction, monitoring, certainly transparent reporting, and all of those other aspects that come along with a publicly traded company and what we need to do surrounding ESG. Some of the other nice achievements we have there are the ISS Corporate Prime status. We are ranked a 1, which is the lowest score we can have in terms of risk, which is a great thing for our governance and play in the same arena with our environmental and social components. And lost the slide there. I'm back on.
Yeah, apologies, Ron. I had something coming through on my screen that got me a little. We'll get you back on track here.
There we are. And we're about to go to the next one in a moment anyway. We are also a 3-year running. We have been awarded the top civic 50-minded companies in Philadelphia, which is, again, just another key to show our commitment to all things ESG. Next slide. So by the numbers, want to make one update here. Since I turned this in, I did get an update that 15.3 million square feet of green certified space is now 17.2 million square feet of green certified space. So something we're very, very proud of. Some of our other achievements and goals, again, centered around the environmental sector. We did set a 2018 baseline with 15% reduction targeted for water, energy, and GHG, scope 1 and 2 GHG to be specific. We have surpassed that, well surpassed that at this point, and we'll be looking to set new goals for ourselves and for the company and for our employees to achieve. When we think about health and wellness and getting outdoors, we have 74 acres of urban green space that are found in our buildings in Philadelphia, Austin, and Metro DC. We like to see people getting outside. We like the open air. We like biophilia. We want to incorporate that into all of our developments so that people can grow and have a better feeling and work better. It just changes the whole dynamic of how people are able to work in an office building. And we also have a commitment to the local community, as evidenced through the various funds we've created, to support the areas adjacent to our developments. We really see it that the impact our buildings have on the local community has to be something where we delve into those communities to make sure that we are not negatively impacting them, or on a better stance, that we can help raise all ships, and for the blighted communities that we can bring more to them, find jobs, and find other ways of helping raise those communities up. Next slide. In 2022, or yes, excuse me, 2023, we did a materiality assessment to really take a temperature of our tenants, our customers, our investors, our employees, our board, to see what mattered to them. And the interesting thing was that 88% of respondents rank ESG as a priority. Well, that's interesting, but what was more interesting was what they ranked highly. But certainly health and safety made it to the top of that list. And health and safety takes into account a number of different focuses. So that's, health and wellness. That's having gyms. That's having green space. That's having commutation that reduces GHG on the environment. And we really decided to dive into that and utilize that information to make better informed decisions as we move forward with our continued evolution of our ESG program here. Next slide. There, thank you. So health and wellness at the forefront. Again, going back to that 74 acres of urban, and that's the really neat thing about it. This is not the suburban stuff where we have a lot of green space. This is in the urban environments. By incorporating more than 74 acres of green spaces in our developments, we believe that these areas are a way to activate community engagement for festivals, for health, for exercise, support of the arts, and for public meeting spaces that foster community growth and collaboration. The over 74 acres of green space are both ground level and rooftop oriented. In fact, 35,000 square feet of that is green rooftops. To that point, again, we're fostering community engagement activities, health and wellness activities, and opportunities for the public to be able to utilize these spaces that were otherwise not available to them. For anybody who works in Manhattan, Philadelphia, it's a concrete and a metal jungle. And unfortunately, we have to take a little bit more action to bring these spaces to light, to bring them and lift them up, and to make sure that they are accessible for all of the folks that want to use them. Health and wellness has certainly become the biggest driver post-COVID, with high response averages for key concerns within buildings being around IAQ or indoor air quality, filter use frequency of change for clean air. And additionally, and more to the focus of this, is that the accessibility of buildings to high-speed rail lines, trains, buses, other non-car required opportunities that employees can utilize is been critical to getting people back in. But I think it's really critical as well, and as we're all seeing, to our future, which is reducing that GHG, having folks in the city, but not overwhelming our local systems with cars on the road for really no practical reason anymore, because there are so many other opportunities. Interestingly enough, Jaunt Pass is a company that works here in Philadelphia. Not plugging them, I have no background with them. I just find their focus to be very unique. They work with employers to offer passes to the employees so that they don't have to worry about paying for, frankly, that commutation. But it helps sort of bring folks back, get them back in and give them an opportunity to really move more toward coming into the office as opposed to staying at home any longer. Next slide. Thank you. So one of the things, or one of the ways we go about doing this, and we've been doing this for years, are our shuttles. If the picture you're looking at, which I apologize, not the greatest picture in the world, is our Radnor shuttle. So in Radnor, Pennsylvania, where we have a number of office parks that have multiple buildings and an inordinate amount of tenants, the accessibility, the public transportation access, they're a hallmark of our commitment. And we look to build around accessibility-centric areas so that commutation is much simpler, as I stated before. We have bike share. We've got ride share components in a majority of our properties. In the city, we have Uber and Lyft markers so that we have pickup for that. But the Radnor shuttle. So this is our exclusive shuttle service, which provides reliable transportation to local SEPTA, which is Southeast Pennsylvania Transportation, the Paoli and Thorndale lines, the Norristown High-Speed Line, and the Wayne Business District from all 11 of our Radnor properties, which are all marked out very nicely in that, well, not the best to see, but very nicely in that diagram. The shuttle runs from early morning to evening, providing access for commuters throughout the day. The shuttle provides more opportunities for commuters as well as out-of-town visitors to enjoy the ease of public transportation, taking them straight from their doors, from the doors of the train to the doors of their offices. And we are averaging in Radnor around 100 to 135 riders a week. So not the greatest intense use, but again, I think we will see that start to come back up and take on a greater use as time goes on. In University City, where our headquarters are here in Philadelphia, we have the Sierra Center shuttle, which has been in service since 2005. Again, well before this focus was, put up there on lights on Broadway, right? This was something that was new, something most companies weren't doing. What we did was we created the shuttle so that we could get folks around to the different train stations. At 30th Street Station here in the city, there isn't a New Jersey line. So we needed to make sure that we could get folks and cart folks over to that area as well. And the bottom line is that at a time when prospective tenants were hesitant to sign leases in University City and in Philadelphia specifically, the shuttle was an important amenity that helped convince tenants to move across the river and into the area around 30th Street Station, not only for ease, to access to the Amtrak lines and the SEPTA lines, but also for access to City Hall, to the Criminal Justice Center, which is most applicable to law firms that we find in our buildings, to restaurants and shopping. Now, in the city, ridership varies based on the day of the week. It's peaking at about 60 to 70 rides per day. And riders have access to the Ride System app, which we provide when you're a tenant in our building, so that you can not only track where that bus is, so it's almost like wayfinding, you don't need to waste time going down, but also so that they can track where it's going and when it'll get back to them so that they can figure out their days. Next slide, thank you. So this is the last piece here, out in Austin, Texas, where we are working on a 68-acre master plan development, which was the former IBM campus out in Austin, Texas. And we're transforming that into a mixed-use development, which will include a new metro rail station. We have partnered with the public entities and the local government to work through this. It is taking time. It is certainly a very, very big lift. But at the end of the day, when we look at this, we see such a number of different things. I can make the very simple statement to say, yes, we are hopefully removing cars from the road, reducing GHG. But what these high-speed rail lines really do is, in my opinion, and please take it at that, they connect folks who otherwise couldn't get from one area to another. Those that don't have cars, can't afford cars, perhaps they can't afford the insurance, or in this day and age, unfortunately, the gas that you have to pay for your car. Well, these high-speed rail lines in 15 minutes connect folks to different areas where you increase the ability for them to find new jobs, to find well-paying and high-paying jobs, to change that socioeconomic effect for the better for everyone. Companies that otherwise wouldn't get to meet certain folks because they weren't able to get there for the job interview or to actually even think they could apply for the job, now have the ability to get out. So everybody wins in this. And the bottom line is that that's really where it's all at, right? I mean, why are we doing this? We're doing this to bring everyone together, to raise up all ships, and frankly, to drive a better outcome for all different communities throughout all the different markets we work in. That is what I had. I hope I covered it well, and I will turn it back over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Ron. That was wonderful. And next up, we're going to have Brendon kick us off from Google.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Ron, for your thoughts. Some of what I have to share actually coincides well with that. And Rob, thanks for the invitation. It's cool to be here. Many of you know Rob and I go way back. I looked at the calendar, Rob. It's 25 years this year that we worked together back in the 1900s. Right. It was 1999, but 1900s. And since then, after working in Philadelphia for a bit, I also worked in Colorado, and now I'm calling from the Bay Area, our office in Sunnyvale. In fact, the office that we're in, and Ron, I know you'll appreciate this. If you look behind me, that's the north-facing sun. So that's one of the strategies of the building that we built here to actually get natural light without actually causing additional heating and cooling costs associated with the building. So sustainability is starting to get woven into everything we do. So I'll tell you, so my role is heading up the global transportation team here at Google. And What I'll do is primarily talk about our team's role and how it relates to mobility options, sustainability, and climate improvements. I'll touch briefly upon Google's broader sustainability commitments because our team works with the broader sustainability goals. Commuting is one aspect of that, and I'll reference that. And then I'll talk a little bit more about kind of the why we do it and some of the cool things that are happening to come. I have a couple of brief slides here that should give a little bit of additional color, and you can advance to the next one after this. And this context of what my team is directly responsible for is probably helpful. Google is well known, but we have offices globally, and the context that we operate in are widely varied. And so we have suburban office park context similar to what we have in the Bay Area, but then we also have very urban context where public transport is superb and a lot of people live proximate that can walk. And then we have kind of everything in between. And then we're in big cities, we're in small cities, and in places like Europe, we have really strong public transportation, but in lots of other parts of the global portfolio, maybe not as much. So our team has been called upon to kind of fill in the gaps where it makes most business sense. So for the commute side of things, on the top left bubble there, we do have an employee shuttle service that's pretty extensive in the Bay Area and then in a handful of other cities globally. We often leverage public transport, and it could be downtown urban heavy rail systems. It could be suburban light rail systems. We have commuter rail services that are proximate to our offices. And increasingly over time, our company's been intentional about trying to locate near public transport the best we can. But the legacy of places like Silicon Valley and some other places where large pools of talent reside tend to be more in a suburban context where parking and traffic challenges become a much different opportunity and for our team to help with. Where we can, biking is a huge part of what we do. And then there's an increased focus on electric charging, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Once you're here at the office, though, there's a huge opportunity, and we really encourage people to get around campuses. There's a lot of emphasis on interactions with both teams that you work directly with as well as cross-functional teams. And so moving around our campus environments is also very important to us. So oftentimes we'll have car services or van services where it makes sense. Our team is actually responsible for new infrastructure improvements. So that could be new sidewalks or new bike lanes. And in some cases, we have some really nice green links, we call them, where it's multi-use, usually a bike and pedestrian. Increasingly, we found that things like electric scooters and electric bikes are an important part of that. And then our iconic G-Bike, which many of you have probably seen pictures of on the top right, is custom built for us, and it's one of our flagship programs that we really enjoy. So on the next slide, a little bit of the rationale behind why a company like this would do this. Recruitment and retention is sort of an obvious one. Employee productivity is another. Reducing traffic, reducing parking demand. There's other business needs that often come into play. And then in some cases, we actually have local regulations and requirements. But the one I want to talk about today is sustainability. And in the past, sustainability or the green benefits was like, oh yeah, that too, anytime we would talk about justifications for our programs. But now it's really become front and center, and it's one of the central drivers of what motivates us and how we think about our full suite of services globally. On the next slide, I'll spend the remainder of the talk on this as kind of the backdrop, but I'll tell a few kind of background and stories. I think the most important thing to know is that Google, over the last several years, I've been here since 2009, so this will be 15 years. I'd say in the past, ever since I've started, but increasingly so over the past few years, this emphasis on sustainability and sustainability commitments has been a huge part of our overall business strategy. To the point where, as a company, we actually have quite a bit of public-facing information that some of you might have seen. My favorite site that publishes a lot of what we're up to it's a simple URL. It's simply sustainability.google. And if you go to that, that has a splash page that actually emphasizes some of the main transportation-related stuff. So that's things like, sustainability while you're traveling or while you're on a road trip or while you're commuting. And what our team has done is we've evolved our employee-facing services to match what's happening at the company-wide level. A way I like to think about it is when Google thinks about its products and its services, it's trying to serve the millions and the billions of people out in the world, whereas my team is responsible for the thousands of employees. But it's a critical part of demonstrating Google's commitment is that the employee base is directly participating in some of these things that Google is committed to more broadly. And so that's where our team comes into play. And so our teams, our annual plan, our objectives, our budget is all built around ensuring the different opportunities that we have. So for us, we're directly tasked with contributing to Google's environmental sustainability commitments. We're looking for getting Googlers to and from work, as well as their midday mobility, but also encouraging and inspiring others to follow suit so that we have an influence beyond just what we're up to. And so webinars like this is a great example of some of the opportunities that we see as important for us to continue to demonstrate leadership in this space, demonstrate the company's overall commitments while also doing the right thing with our employee base. So as we think about how we go about this, two key points that really are part of our DNA. First is that we are data-driven. And so everything that we do, we measure and we make sure that it's meeting the objectives and the goals that we set out for, and that if we need to adjust our goals to be even more ambitious, which is often the case, we will do that. And then the other is that it should make business sense. So, we're a publicly traded company as Ron's is, and, there is a fiduciary responsibility that we have. And what we do is we look at these investments and we kind of look at the opposite and say, what's the cost of not doing this? And so these investments and they are investments, really matter towards our overall company bottom line. And if they're not doing that, then we might, find other ways to demonstrate those sustainability commitments. So for us, as we think about kind of what's ahead and what we're really focused on, there's 5 main areas that I'll highlight. The first is that we want to increase the percentage of electric fleet vehicles with the goal of eventually fully electrifying our fleet. So in the Bay Area, we're known for the shuttle operations. That's some of the buses that you see in the pictures here. We're up to about 50 of these, 51 exactly, which represents about 15% of our fleet. So we have a huge fleet here. We're on the trend to get that fully electric. Beyond our employee shuttle service, we also have a number of car services, and we also have a number of fleet services that handle things like logistics and so forth. And we're well on the way to continue to get that fully electrified. We have a huge operation in India. We have 5 cities that we operate in India, and there's car or cab services, as we call them there. And we're about 30% of the way there. And it's a much larger fleet, although they're smaller vehicles. And we're working really diligently to continue to do that. I will say one of the biggest limitations for us is actually the electric charging infrastructure. So the vehicles themselves become an easier time of purchasing, but then making sure they stay charged has been our biggest challenge. And that gives me to the second point, which is installing the charging capacity to meet that workplace charging growth. Now in this, we're talking about our fleet vehicles, but we're also talking about Google employee personal vehicles. So as far as we know, we're the largest corporate provided free electric vehicle charging ports anywhere in the US. Now, there could be somebody that tells me there's more, but as far as we know, we have the highest number of level 2 chargers. We're up to about 6,000 ports in our parking lots, truly to encourage employees to use electric cars. We're up to about 1.1 million sessions per year. So of those ports, they're heavily utilized, and we've actually created some waitlist systems to allow multiple uses per day on the same port, given that the demand is exceeding the supply in most cases. That said, I will put in a plug for our third area, which is we want to increase the number of sustainable commuters by converting additional single occupant vehicles, or SOVs in our world, to active transportation. So if you're going to drive alone, it might as well be in an electric car, but we want to encourage even fewer cars on the road altogether. And so that's things like programs that support biking, scooters, public transport for sure in a lot of places, and even walking and kind of finding opportunities to encourage more development, residential development to happen closer to places where people can either take transit or even walk to work. Third area is with that fourth area, I should say, is the supply and demand imbalance is kind of creating some opportunities for us to rethink how do we do this. In the early days, we really wanted to encourage early adoption of electric vehicles by employees, but so many people did so that now we don't have enough charging infrastructure. And so we're thinking through what are some better ways to manage that. Now, when we first started doing this, 10 years ago, so 10, even 12 years ago, the range on electric vehicles was much less, and the charging need was almost like literally a need to get home. And now with higher range capacity, it's more of a top off and more of a convenience. So we're toying with ideas of like, hey, it's free for the first little bit, but then maybe there's a fee or maybe there's a restriction after a certain period of time. So we're piloting programs, and that's one of the new opportunities that we have for us. And then the last area is what I already mentioned, which is how can we be an inspiration? How can we support broader efforts to create that mobility network that really enables more and more use of alternative modes and further electrification to help with our overall sustainability commitments. And being in the California area, there's a lot of good things happening here, and there's a lot of other things that we're tracking globally that makes a lot of sense. So super high review. I'd love to answer questions at the end if there's time. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Great. Thank you, Brendon. Aaron.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hopping on the webinar. I've got a flurry of slides, so mine are going to go real quick, and we'll try to keep this to my 12 minutes here. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to, again, try to hit the mobility and sustainability discussion, but with a campus lens. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about what I think are the foundations of sustainability at the university, how we evaluate mobility and access, and then a couple ideas for maybe opportunities for leadership for those that are at universities or large campuses. Next slide, please. So from the sustainability side, next slide, please. Sustainability really is an outward commitment to transparency. At the university here, we've been recognized for sustainability, but you're really putting yourself out there, right? You have to make those commitments, and you can see from the screen all the different sustainability related certifications we have. I put in the chat a couple links if you want to read in more detail about our sustainability report. Next slide, please. I think at the heart of sustainability is the decision regarding land use and how you want to use it, especially as a campus. The picture you're seeing here is our campus in the early 60s, and today the street with all the cars on it there is actually our pedestrian mall. It's car free. It's a safe place to be, but decisions were made to change the way our campus operates. Next slide, please. Land use is at the heart of providing access. So, it could be transit, it could be BRT, it could be rail. Providing that access and connectivity is going to support sustainable decisions and behaviors. Next slide, please. We actually, at our university, have a federally funded transit center at the heart of our campus, and that brings 11 routes throughout the community to the university. So again, land use decision to our benefit from a sustainability standpoint. Next slide, please. We've used land as match as well for a federal FTA small starts grant to bring bus rapid transit to Fort Collins. We're actually going after a second one that will go through our campus as well this year. Next slide, please. On the bike side, there is a definitive dedication that must be made to infrastructure to support people to cycle. I'm going to talk about safety in a minute, but you need to be dedicating land to trails and that valuable land right up next to every building for those gorgeous bike racks that you see on the photo here. Next slide, please. You also need to be actively engaged with your campus users, your employees, your students, your visitors. You need to train them related to sustainable behaviors. And for my job, it's on the commuting side, but a willingness to spend the time with your employees and students is key. The next slide, please. The last thing I just wanted to share was you need to know your emissions and where they're coming from as part of your climate action planning. I just give an example here where we or I was pushed pretty heavily to come up with an air travel offset program for the university based on our air travel and commuting emissions a number of years back. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about mobility and access and how I measure it with a university lens. Next slide. The first one is safety. Your campus users want to know that they're safe, however they're choosing to commute. Our university this past year adopted Vision Zero, which is a commitment to transparently state that any traffic-related death or major injury is unacceptable to the university and that we are striving to make improvements. Next slide, please. You need to understand the context of your campus. Where are those conflict points? How are people commuting? Which ways are they commuting in? And what are those defined action steps that you're going to implement to reduce conflict and hopefully improve safety on your campus? Next slide. Vision Zero for us was an effort to adopt complete street standards specific to the university environment. It was dedicating a group of individuals to go out and evaluate crashes on site with a lens maybe a little different than a police report, but actually trying to see what and how we could do better. It's being active in development and conceptual review. So when we build something new in a capital project, is the safety lens being evaluated? And then transparently telling our university, look, this is where we're going to spend the limited resources we have to improve safety on campus. Next slide, please. Vision Zero also requires a public-facing dashboard where you're sharing where we're seeing those conflict points and how we're taking steps to address them. Next slide, please. Second component for mobility and access is how welcoming of a campus are you? It's that social sustainability lens, right? This map is showing you some of the inclusive amenities we have on our campus. Next slide, please. We have an inclusive policy on our campus, specifically for the physical environment, and I've highlighted in the policy that commuting is part of how we welcome individuals to our campus. Next slide, please. You do this with strict design standards that ensure that you have facilities like all gender bathrooms, lactation facilities, commuter showers, reflection spaces, break rooms, changing tables, indoor bike parking, anything that helps eliminate a redundant or unnecessary trip for one of your campus users. Next slide, please. This allows you to help set goals. This map is showing you where lactation facilities were a couple years back. And we were able to set a goal of saying that, look, that an employee or student shouldn't have to walk more than 500 feet to the next facility. And then if we have a building that comes up where there's a gap, we can hold them accountable and make sure that the amenity is constructed. Next slide, please. I'm going to finish up with a couple of these leadership opportunities. If you go to the next slide, please. The first thing I would plea to you all is to really know your customers well. I certainly see our students and employees and visitors as customers, and they all have unique needs. And certainly the data side of what Brendon shared is the same here at CSU. You're looking at a graph of our bike counters on campus and where people are making bike transportation choices across our campus. Next slide. You need to know where your employees live, and you need to understand their commute a little better. I've shared the housing and transportation index webpage there in the corner of that slide. You need to understand, is everyone commuting in from a long distance, or are they close, and what is that combined housing and transportation impact to them? Next slide, please. You need to know how far they're traveling. And if you have ways of breaking down your employees and students in a way that might create new target audiences, this is actually broken down by employee classification. Next slide, please. Probably standard for all of you on the call that you need to know how they're traveling, and you need to be active about soliciting how they travel so you can make refined decisions. Next slide, please. Second part of leadership is accepting your role as a representative. Universities can be somewhat insular. You need to get out and represent your university or your campus. We are the 23rd largest city in Colorado, just our university alone, and that provides us a seat at the table with our city, with our MPO, and with our Department of Transportation. Next slide, please. There are many ways that you can represent or support some of these entities that you partner with. You can host their public involvement on your campus. You can survey employees and students. You can map home addresses for municipal planning purposes. You can map transit boardings. You can be an active participant in development review and provide comment about student-specific residences or nearby businesses that might be coming in near your campus. And then, of course, you can write letters of support. Next slide, please. Here's an example, campus context. We finished our TDM plan a year ago, and you can see we met about 10% of our campus, about 3,500 stakeholders, and this covered presentations, workshops, pop-up events all over campus so we could reach our students, focus groups, and surveying that we did across the campus. Next slide, please. Knowing where your employees live is huge too. You can represent this again in municipal planning, that you're representing not only yourself, not only your university, but all those people that commute in. And then my last slide is just the map of where employees and students live with respects to a low stress bikeway through the community. And at the time we were going after a grant and trying to justify, look, if we built this safe bikeway, that we had over 8,000 people within a half mile of this corridor that could commute to the university if some improvements were made through the grant. So with that, I will finish my 12 minutes and thank you all for attending and look forward to your questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Andy.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Keeton. This is a picture of me before I cut my hair. So, a lot changes in COVID. One of it is people grow long hair and then they cut it. But I think the bigger thing that I'm excited to talk about today is really the change that COVID has brought about and what we've seen since the pandemic started and continues. And I say continues because I'm actually still recovering from COVID myself. So apologies if I'm a little slow today. Still have a little bit of the COVID brain. Anyway, so my name is Andy Keeton. I'm the Vice President of Global Strategy at Commutifi. What that means is I work with organizations across North America, Europe, and beyond to better plan out and understand and manage their commuting programs for their employees, their students, in the case of universities, or folks coming into their buildings when we're talking about commercial real estate. You can go to the next slide, please. So a little bit about Commutifi. We help organizations build, launch, procure, and manage commute programs that do more and cost less. I like to say that because we're talking today about sustainability. Brendon brought up some other reasons why, like Google, for instance, is interested in TDM and commuter programs. But it always comes down to brass tacks in the end. And any sort of TDM program has to get that approval from someone high enough up, and really what it comes down to is cost. So when we're working with organizations, the key is how we get that leadership buy-in. And the way to do that, in our opinion, is to create these programs that do more and cost less. Next slide, please. So what we see as I've been working with organizations really in the past few years, like I said, a lot has changed since before COVID, so it's really a new era we're in. A few major challenges facing the folks trying to implement these programs, particularly when they're talking to their leadership. That first is visibility. Surprisingly, maybe to some, maybe not to others, there's still a lot of kind of guesswork and unsureness about what commuting means, particularly as you go higher up in an organization. So if you were to talk to, let's say, a CFO of Google, I would doubt that they really would understand the exact implications of their commuting. Hopefully, Brendon does a good job of updating the team and it gets up the ladder. But what we've noticed is commuting actually can have quite a big impact on the bottom line and on sustainability goals. We'll talk about in a second. And really, that guesswork, that visibility up that ladder is complex and difficult, particularly as you get more complex in these large-scale situations where we're talking about multi-site or big organizations like universities and private companies. I think this is a problem that all of us in the TDM space have: unclear kind of ROI, uncontextualized and disorganized data. Aaron did a good job talking about all this data that they have at Colorado State University and how to bring all of that in. That's a lot of work. And I know, he has a pretty big team working alongside him. Not every organization is lucky enough to have that. So being able to bring all that together is something we try to help organizations do. I talked about cost. Budgeting is the biggest challenge, I think, when I talk to anyone at any organization, regardless of the size, is how do we get this budget? How do we convince someone? How do we justify this spending? That's always a big challenge. And the exciting piece, and I think why we're here today, is talking about sustainability. Sustainability is actually opening up these budgets a bit. There's pressure coming from investors and other folks, I'll talk about it in a little bit, to meet goals around sustainability. And that pressure is driving kind of ambitious internal emissions goals from organizations that you would expect, and also organizations that you wouldn't expect. And increasingly, we're getting to see more and more government regulations coming down the pipe as well. So this is just going to become a bigger and bigger thing from what we're seeing kind of with Europe and the EU kind of leading the way and the United States following behind. This will be a bigger topic. And then, the final challenge here is just how to optimize all of this. So if you can get all of that budget sorted out, you have all the data, and you have, some big goal like sustainability driving things, how do you actually make sure you can be successful, be efficient, not, spend your money kind of in the wrong ways? So these are a lot of the things that we see organizations do. I want to hyper focus in on that sustainability piece. So next slide. Really quick, I could give I do this all the time. I could give a whole, spiel about what Commutifi is, but just to high level, we have two products called Compass and Command Center. Compass helps you see and optimize your spend and your data, and Command Center helps you take action out of the insights. So I like to say this: data, insights, action. A lot of organizations, they want to jump straight into action, particularly if we're talking about senior leadership who hasn't, who's kind of maybe hears this buzzword, oh, commuting, oh, sustainability, let's just jump in and solve something. That can work if you're lucky, but you're kind of throwing a dart. So making sure that you have that data behind you, the insights driving the action you want to take is really important. And otherwise you'll see programs kind of flop, and if you don't have the right the systems in place, you won't be able to kind of turn that around. Next slide. So specifically, we're talking about sustainability, and some of you might have seen some of these data points before in other talks I've given, but I want to take a step back and think about why and where this is coming from, and how big of an opportunity this is for TDM and for commuting. 16% is the amount that transportation energy use exceeds operating energy in an average building. This was a 2022 study. So what that means is, I think if you were to ask just the average person, hey, what can we do to create a sustainable building, they're going to say, oh, let's put solar on the building. Let's use energy efficient light bulbs. And that's true. But really right now, what we're seeing, and in part because so much investment has gone into the physical infrastructure, that transportation to and from that building is now becoming more and exceedingly more of the emissions for that building's footprint. Next slide, please. What does this kind of boil down to? So this is an example of a company we've worked with sites across the globe in North America, South America, Europe, Middle East, in the Asia Pacific area. Commuting actually accounts for about 10% of that organization's total emissions. When you talk about the entire scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, what does that mean if you're not familiar? Scope 1 are direct emissions. Scope 2 are sort of like these indirect emissions coming through some of the work that you're doing. Scope 3 is really the big piece. Most companies have an idea of scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 is everything that's like impacting your supply chain. Commuting fits in there, as well as things like third-party purchasing and employee travel. So commuting seems small when you look at it. It's one of many categories within that scope 3 section, but it still can account for quite a bit. If you look at this data in the bottom kind of blue segment there, we can't really expect 100% mode shift. That's not going to happen from where you're driving alone right now. But if you were to see something like a 25% mode shift to carpooling or to transit, we're talking about millions of pounds of CO2 a year that can be saved from this one company of about 20,000 employees. So when we talk about globally, these are huge shifts. These aren't small things that can happen, and companies are starting to take notice there. Next slide, please. I think a really good example of this is a financial institution we're working with that's been kind of on the forefront of the ESG thing for years. They measured their baseline back in 2007 and have been working for a while to try to improve their emissions across all 3 scopes. What they see, or what they've seen, is a fairly easy path forward to reducing their emissions, and most of their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. That's the kind of scope 1 is that pink line. Most everything else is in that purple line. What we see in that green line is employee commuting, which started as the highest piece for them of the kind of sustainability emissions puzzle, but it's actually grown since then. And that's not necessarily because they have had more commuting or worse commuting. It's actually the opposite. With COVID, they've reduced their commuting emissions pretty dramatically, but they've reduced everything else more. So we're starting to see this about, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago when we would talk to, when I talked to someone about sustainability, they'd say, yeah, we understand commuting's in there. It's not something we care about right now. One day we'll get to that. And those conversations are starting to come around now as companies more and more are seeing, okay, we figured out how to do a lot of these things. Commuting is such a different problem. It's not something you can solve with technology. It's not something that really you actually have complete control over. You can do things to support it, but it comes down to employee choice as well. Next slide, please. So just to put like a finer point on this, I threw some numbers together. These are numbers from average emissions based on a few different types of vehicles on the top, or a few different types of transit kind of systems or uses on the bottom. So I know for a fact Brendon does not drive 15 miles each way 5 days a week to get to work, but let's assume he did. If he took an average car, that's 6,000, almost 7,000 pounds of CO2 a year. So we, as Brendon was saying too, shifting someone to an electric vehicle is great. Shifting someone to a hybrid vehicle, an electric vehicle is a great way to do it. You can see pretty dramatic changes just from going, if you look at that kind of far right line, if he had been driving that F-150 and he switches to a Prius, he's reducing his emissions almost 3-fold. So that's huge. But shifting instead to public transit is going to have that bigger impact. And so it's kind of easy to see that TDM flowing in there. And we all know that anecdotally, but it's nice to see the numbers. So shifting from a car down to transit is, 5 times less emissions. But why I really like this slide is, let's imagine Aaron is living in Vancouver and he's taking public transit 15 miles each way, 5 days a week. If he was living just in an average North American community taking public transit, he'd be looking at somewhere in, the 1,600 pounds of CO2 a year. An average bus across North America is higher because buses are more emissions heavy than, let's say, light rail or a metro system, a subway system. But in somewhere like Vancouver, where they've heavily invested in sustainable fuels, in electric vehicles, and they have a very, very clean grid, you can see something like, if you could convince Aaron to stop driving his F-150 and switch to the SkyTrain, which is like their light rail kind of subway system, that's practically going to zero emissions. So as we see more kind of communities, cities, public transit agencies investing in these sustainable systems, that's also having an impact on that scope 3 emissions for employers, which is really exciting. When we think about that financial institution I was just talking about, they actually, before using us, were using kind of that average transit number. Once we started working with them, we were saying, hey, look, there's these better ways to measure things based on the actual emissions of the system in Vancouver. You've been smart enough to place your sites here in a very clean area. They reduced their emissions, something like 10-20%. They didn't actually reduce them. They just realized the real reduction that was there. So next slide, and I'll skip through because I see we're at time here. Corporate sustainability is huge across every sector. Almost every company at this point is investing in their ESG programs. And this is trickling down. We actually, as a vendor ourselves, we're now having some of our companies that we work with ask us to measure our emissions within the next 3 years, because that's part of scope 3 as well. So every organization, big or small, probably by 2030 is going to be needing to measure sustainability one way or another. Next slide. And this is coming from a lot of different places. But the big thing I like to say is this is really coming from investors at the forefront, financiers. That's where the money is coming from. Money is driving this. Regulatory bodies are putting things in place to make this a legal requirement. But whether or not that happens is not really that necessary. This is going to come, and we're really excited. We're seeing more and more sustainability driving the discussion. And last slide, actually, you can skip that. We did an ebook I can share with you if you want. Last slide here. ESG is an opportunity for TDM. So if you're someone who's working in TDM, looking at commuting, yes, commuting can help with sustainability, but really I think ESG is that big opportunity. This is, everyone should be leaning into this and thinking about it more and more. So really excited about where the industry is going, and happy to see it continue to grow in the next few years. I'll pass it back to Rob.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you to everyone for joining us. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so I will ask you all maybe one question as we wrap this up. And I also wanted to point out before we do that we have another webinar coming on April 22nd, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and details coming soon on those speakers. But thank you again. We'll give you a virtual round of applause, the 3 of you, or the 4 of you, sorry. And I'll just wanted to ask, if there's, one piece of advice you could leave people on what others could do to help create that kind of better tomorrow, and all the great programs that you all are working on. Just maybe if you go back to Ron and go through and maybe leave a parting comment or piece of advice.
I would say work together. You find the groups that are doing things, find other people of like mind, and the bottom line is we can all drive that home together. Frankly, everyone can be involved. And again, looking at the communities around us, there are a lot of individuals out there that need help. Part of changing the entire sort of outlook out there will be, again, as I've stated now 3 times on this call, raising all ships, getting minority vendors involved, getting women-owned companies involved, getting all of those different folks involved in what you're doing can drive this all home. There are so many aspects to ESG, but the one that we centrally focus in on here at Brandywine is the social aspect. What more can we do to change the environment around us?
Great, thank you. Brendon.
I would repeat what I said earlier. You know, we're a data-driven and cost-benefit analysis approach. I would ask just simply, what's the cost of not doing it? And just force yourself to quantify the various benefits and opportunities that exist.
Aaron.
Engage your leadership. It's really powerful, especially when you're a representative for 35, 40,000 people. Engage your leadership and let them be the voice for sustainability at your university or employer.
Great. Andy.
Everything that everyone else said. But you have what you need to do this now. It might seem like a big lift, but it's doable to make this change and you know, take advantage of kind of the wave that is pushing all of this forward right now. And as Aaron said, work with leadership, and they're interested in this right now more than ever. So it's a good time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for all your organizations are doing phenomenal work and truly leaders in the sustainability and mobility TDM space. So thank you for that. And thank you also to Maureen for helping run the webinar today, and all you do, and Caitlin as well from our team. So that's all we have for today. Thank you again for joining us, and wish everybody a great day. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.